space. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Is it okay for me to go ahead? Yes, okay. Hi, welcome everyone to Abolition and Disability Justice, a roundtable discussion. My name is Leah, L-E-A-H, Lakshmi, L-A-K-S-H-M-I, Piepzna, P-I-E-P-Z-N-A, Samarasinha, S-A-M-A-R-A-S-I-N-H-A. I am a light sand-colored mixed Sri Lankan Roma Irish non-binary femme with big clear cat eye glasses and pink lipstick and brown and gray hair in an undercut. I am so thrilled to be hosting this panel where we will be speaking with three incredible people doing work at the intersections of disability and transformative justice and abolition. Yolo Achille Robinson, Andrea Ritchie, and Elliot Fouqui. I will say more about them in one moment. I'm taking over a little bit at the last minute for Yuri Kim, who unfortunately cannot access this Zoom. Before I do anything else, I'm going to do a little bit of accessibility housekeeping. I'm going to ask participants when you speak to introduce yourselves with your name, pronoun, a brief information of what you look like. I'm going to ask people to keep speaking slowly and pausing so the captioning and simultaneous translation can keep up. Before speaking, please say your name first, i.e. I would say this is Leah speaking. When you use terms and names, if you're saying someone's name, spell it out. For example, if I was citing Xu Bing's work, I'd say his name, sorry, Xu Bing, and then spell it out, X-U-B-I-N-G. For self-care, if you need a break during this workshop, please go do it. Please go stretch, take a walk, drink water, go to the bathroom. Be here as you are in the body and mind you are in today. For Spanish interpretation, you can access it by entering the separate link posted on the event page. And for a little bit of background, this event is being put on by a number of groups, but centrally by the Abolition and Disability Justice Coalition, which is a nationally based collective of abolitionists, psychiatric survivors, people with disabilities, and accomplices. Earlier this year, Elliot Fouqui, E-L-L-I-O-T-T, F-U-K-U-I, Andrea Smith, A-N-D-R-E-A-S-M-I-T-H, Liat Ben Moshe, L-I-A-T-B-E-N-M-O-S-H-E, and several others came together and wrote Alternatives to Policing based on disability justice. Over time, more people and groups have become involved, and this content was published in mid-December. You can see it at the website abolitionanddisabilityjustice.com. I am thrilled to be hosting this panel. I have been involved in disability justice and abolition work since I was involved in the psychiatric survivor and prison abolition movements in Toronto in the late 1990s. I want to start by a land acknowledgement. I'm currently speaking to you from South Seattle on Duwamish, D-U-W-A-M-I-S-H territory, which is governed by the 1865 Treaty of Point Elliott. We come together recognizing that we are meeting, most of us, in North America on stolen Indigenous land. We are meeting here as Indigenous people from many nations, as settlers and the descendants of settlers, refugees, people brought by enslavement, and combinations of all of the above. Land back, treaty rights, reparations, and other frameworks are essential to both disability justice and abolition as a project. We know that colonization and transatlantic slavery created both prisons and abolition. We're here for a crucial conversation about disability justice, a revolutionary framework for disability liberation that centers the leadership, issues, and strategies of Black, brown, queer, and trans disabled people, and abolition. Abolition is not just about ending spaces and practices of incarceration and policing. It's about imagining new ways of life so that a world in which prisons, policing, and other systems become unthinkable. The call, "We keep us safe," reminds us that solutions should empower all people. That includes disabled, neurodivergent, deaf, sick, and mad people, to exercise our self-determination with care and understanding. We all deserve the resources, support, education we need to love and protect ourselves and one another. Now I'm going to introduce the three panelists who we're going to have an amazing conversation about the connectedness and strategies between abolition and disability justice. Yolo Akili Robinson, Y-O-L-O-A-K-I-L-I R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N, is a writer, yoga teacher, sorry, let's just skip back and forth, and the executive director and founder of EAM, E-A-M. For over 15 years, Yolo has been on the forefront of progressive wellness work. At the core of Yolo's work is a commitment to wellness informed by social justice. His interests are the practical embodiment of theory into systems and practices that help heal, transform, and support Black communities. He makes his home in Los Angeles, California. Find out more at beam.community/Yolo Akili, Y-O-L-O-A-K-I-L-I. Elliot Fukui, E-L-L-I-O-T-T-F-U-K-U-I, he, him, has been an organizer, trainer, and facilitator for almost 20 years. He's had the privilege of living and organizing across the country and is currently based in Ohlone territory, O-H-L-O-N-E, the Bay Area. He comes to this work as a mad, queer, and trans Nikkei Hafu psych survivor, N-I-K-K-E-I-H-A-F-U. He's primarily worked in queer and trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, working to support folks in community security strategies, emotional wellness, and safety planning. He loves building curricula, radical cartographies, and movement history. You can visit his website at madqueer.org. Finally, Andrea J. Ritchie, A-N-D-R-E-A-J-R-I-T-C-H-I-E, is the author of the book Invisible No More: Police Violence Against Black Women and Women of Color, and co-author of Say Her Name: Resisting Police Brutality Against Black Women, and of Queer Injustice: The Criminalization of LGBT People in the United States. She is a Black lesbian immigrant survivor who has been documenting, organizing, litigating, advocating, and agitating around policing and criminalization of women and LGBTQ people of color for over 2 decades. Andrea has the privilege of working with Mariam Kaba, M-A-R-I-A-M-E-K-A-B-A, and Woods Irwin, W-O-O-D-S-E-R-V-N, Irvin, at the Interrupting Criminalization Initiative, which you can find at interruptingcriminalization.com. Serving on the Movement for Black Lives policy table and working with groups around the country to defund and abolish policing. Welcome, everyone. We are going to get into it now. Okay, so my first question is the $3 million question, which is just, what are some of the ways you connect disability justice and abolition in your work? How is disability justice deep in abolition, and how does practicing disability justice help us win and get free? I know that's 3 questions. You can answer however you want. I'm looking in the notes. Elliot, I saw you put your answers down first. Is it okay if we start there, or does anyone else really want to go first? Should I pick somebody? Elliot, is that cool?
I can start, because I'm very excited to hear what Yolo and Andrea have to say.
Okay.
So this is Elliot. Elliott. I am a mixed race, Japanese American, transmasculine femme with short brown hair, and I'm wearing a black and gray sweater with black and silver buttons on the shoulder. I call it my fancy sweater. It's for panels only. And I'm so grateful and just humbled to be sharing this space with such amazing comrades and everybody today. So thank you for making time. So this is a big question. This is a big 3 questions. Yeah. So I guess I would start with saying we live in cultures and communities that have been dehumanized and perpetuate dehumanization, right? And I think the beautiful thing about disability justice and abolition, in my experience of them, is that they both work to rehumanize people. And specifically rehumanizing people who are seen as disposable or unworthy or dangerous because we have survived the suppression and oppression that has been placed on our bodies and minds because of our differences. So when we look at both the roots of the medical industrial complex and psychiatry, as well as the prison industrial complex, right? We can see that those systems grew out of the same seeds, right? And have the same roots. And Angela Davis said it best, right? Radical simply means grasping things at the root. So any system that's built that does not honor the humanity, the dignity, and the agency of the people it serves, and I think many of us from many different communities could speak to this, right, across the board, it's obviously not going to be transformative. It's obviously not going to be effective, right, in building the necessary trust that folks need to ask for and receive the care that they need, and to offer the care, right? I think we also assume that disabled folks don't have anything to offer, or folks who are inside or who are currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated don't have anything to offer. And this is a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. Most of my work is primarily supporting people in emotional crises and conflict as someone who has survived institutionalization and psychiatric abuse. And I will name too that even in that work, right, many folks don't use the language of disability or neurodivergence to describe what they are experiencing or how they move through the world, even though that may be how they would be read, right, by police officers or by social workers or by the state. And I think that brings us to, right, how stigma and shame, how internalized ableism and saneism really prevent us from asking for the support that we need, which inherently puts us at higher risk, right, for being caught by the state. Everyone has feelings. If you are alive and a person, you have emotional health, you have emotional wellness. And so I think it's also critical when we think about disability justice and abolition that we also look at why so many of us end up in these systems in the first place is because we cannot ask for, or when we do ask for the support we need, we are unable to receive that support, or that support is not aligned with us and what we actually need in a moment. And as a survivor and an organizer, I can see the way that the relationship between how institutionalization and incarceration are essentially functioning to just warehouse bodies and minds that do not align with like cis white dude standards. And in order for me to find my own wellness and my own way of being in this world after surviving institutionalization, I had to detangle myself from the system and build my own network, right, to survive and keep my agency. And I think that is the thing that I want to plant early on, right, is actually every single one of us is responsible for keeping ourselves and each other safe. There is no external answer that will come, right? We don't have a book lit about like, this is how you do this. So this is a practice. Disability justice is a practice. Abolition is a practice. And they are both proactive approaches, right, to building with our folks that is based in authentic relationship development, right, and recognizes that accountability and understanding and repair are processes that actually require support networks and whole communities, right? Healing and care and emotional and physical wellness and support should not be bonuses in life, right? It should be the baseline of what any of us should expect to receive in our communities. And I'm gonna stop there, and thank you for this time.
This is Leah speaking. Elliot, thank you so much for everything you just contributed. Who wants to go next? It's like the Jello wrestling moment. You put YOLO. Okay, I just saw YOLO's finger first, so I'm gonna pick YOLO if that's okay.
This is YOLO, YOLO, and I was pointing to Andrea, ANDREA. We were pointing at each other. I am a caramel-colored Black person, non-binary person with a bald fade and a dark top, as well as my signature long dangly earring, which is silver today. And I am wearing a dark blue shirt with small white flowers on it. And also my signature purple geode amethyst ring, which is my favorite. So happy to be here today. Really excited to be a part of the conversation and the dialogue. I want to begin by saying that at Beam and in our work, we often use the term healing justice. And I want to be very clear and explicit in naming that there is no healing justice without disability justice. That it is really the work of Black and brown and queer and trans, disabled, chronically ill folks, people living with HIV, that really provided the theoretical framework for what we understand healing justice to be. I also want to pause there and make sure I'm very clear too, that the term healing itself has such a deeply ableist and racist and misogynistic history. And so I want to be clear that when I say that term, what I'm invoking and what I'm inviting into the space. And so when I say healing, I think about healing as not about creating a world where everyone can acquiesce to an ableist vision of being. I see healing as a lifelong art and practice of relating to our feelings in a manner that fosters liberation, interdependence, tenderness, and joy. And so when we talk about that lifelong practice, it means relating to my rage, my scatteredness, my frustration, whatever state I'm in. How do we cultivate communities that allow us to be in relationship to whatever state we are in a way that fosters, once again, liberation, interdependence, tenderness, and joy. And I want to be clear in naming that. Pause for a moment there. The next piece I want to lift up in terms of how I see disability justice connected to abolition and also to healing justice In a lot of my work, the way in which this shows up is often in our engagement with dominant mental health and clinical institutions. To put this frankly, dethroning them as the authority on our bodies and our lives. And it is very difficult for even many Black clinicians or many clinicians to hear us articulate that position. We will often offer that while the mechanisms that Western medicine has created may have useful medicine within them in sometimes, right? Some useful medicine. They are not the authority nor the absolute, nor are they the only way that we can access healing or liberation or wellness, right? And so I think that's really important in our work, and it often off-puts people when we come into spaces with them, when we say, well, we actually believe in village care. We actually believe that our mental health and our wellness and the healing work is held by big mamas, is held by barbers, is held by stylists, teachers, coaches, friends, and colleagues, and that work is often sometimes more critical than the work that happens in those talk therapy sessions that people in Western medicine often elevate. And that while we also, without those additional village care, those interventions would be and still continue to be not adequate for our wellness. So that is one particular piece. And through that lifting of village care is really for us, or for me, is really abolition in a way that it's reimagining, putting the tools and strategies, or refining the tools and strategies that we have always had and elevating them. Because it's so important to name that for Black and queer and brown and trans communities, we have had our own mechanisms to navigate distress, whether that is for people living with mental conditions, whether that's people who are neurodivergent. We've had all these strategies that have been dismissed and denied. And what has happened instead is the academy has taken and stolen that knowledge, repurposed it, and sold it back to us as if it is not something that we already know in our own ways of being. And so I think that that is one of the ways to think about abolition is saying to some of these university systems, you stole this from us. You actually don't. These theories, this perspective, this entire approach was stolen from Indigenous folks, stolen from Black folks, and really taking it back and saying you don't get to be the authority on this, and you never should have been. And so I will pause there.
This is Leah speaking. Thank you so much. And Yolo, I just want to reflect that in the Q&A, the last time I looked, there was like 5 people saying, thank you for that framing. Thank you for that definition of healing. I thank you for that definition of healing. It makes me think about something I think about a lot, where as abolitionists and as disability justice folks, we're often kind of approached by people and they're like, well, what are you going to replace the prisons with? What are you going to replace the institutions with? And I'm like, it's replacing a gun with an ecosystem. It's not like you just take one peg out and put in another that's a different color. You change the whole thing, right? I'm gonna open it up to Andrea Ritchie to say what she has to say. Andrea, we all can't wait to hear from you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I just wrote down yet another mind-blowing thing that I learned from the 3 people on this panel. So I'm so grateful. I am Andrea, Andrea. I'm a light-skinned Black woman who sometimes, depending on the season, might be white passing. I have curly hair and purple glasses, and I'm wearing a brown sleeveless top. I am coming to you from the land of the Kashaya people, Kashaya. And I do want to start by naming my teachers. In spite of the fact that I have been disabled for 25 years, I have not always led with a disability justice analysis. And I have deeply manifested ableism in my own work, and I am unlearning and in a practice of accountability around that and doing better. In addition to everyone on this call, E. Williams was one of my teachers, and I want to honor their legacy and their loss. Their name is spelled E, the letter, or Elandria, Elandria Williams. Also Leah and that's Leah, our host, and the Creating Collective Access crew at the Allied Media Conference, Leroy Moore, Leroimoore, and the group Sins Invalid, SINSINVALID, Kara Page, CARAPAGE, one of the originators of the Healing Justice Framework that Yolo just referred to, Mia Mingus, MIAMINGUS, Shira Hassan, SHIRAHASSAN, TL, letters T, letter L, Dustin Gibson, DUSTIN, GIBSON, and so many more. I could be spelling names all day, but I really wanted to name those teachers who have been holding me in accountability for decades, and I'm really grateful, and in learning and in shared community. My work focuses on police violence and
Andrea,
yeah.
I'm going to
Yes.
interrupt. Just slow down and pause a little bit more.
Thank you.
No worries.
My work focuses on police violence, and obviously disabled people have been targets of state violence since the US exists, have been incarcerated in asylums, have been policed under laws that were explicitly created to remove disabled bodies from public spaces, have been subjected to forced sterilization, and also to forced incarceration when police respond to what Elliot was describing as someone having unmet needs, emotional reactions we all have, and in ways that are deadly or result in incarceration. Half to 2/3 of people who are killed by police are or are perceived to be disabled in some way. And in many cases, it involves being perceived to be in a mental health crisis, which is something that Black people are always perceived to be. Black people are always perceived to be deranged and disabled from a mental health perspective. But sometimes it also can involve people who are deaf or hard of hearing, or people who are physically disabled and unable to comply with police orders. And this is particularly true as we're all sitting with the police killing of Breonna Taylor. That when we think about Black, Indigenous women, and trans people of color, that though the majority of folks who are killed who are women or queer people of color are disabled or are perceived to be disabled based on stories about us that come from colonialism, that come from anti-Blackness, that come from slavery, that play out to this day in police interactions. And so what that means is that abolition obviously requires disability justice, that ableism, and it requires us to understand as TL and the Disability Justice Primer that Sins Invalid created, and the organization is called SINS Invalid, INVALID. Ableism and anti-Blackness and racial capitalism are all inextricably intertwined. And abolition requires us to get rid of all of them in order to be able to get to a place of collective care in the ways that people have been describing. And that leads us to an understanding of how policing extends beyond police to medical providers, to social work providers, to actually every system that is framed as a helping system polices disabled bodies and people and communities that are perceived as inherently disabled through anti-Blackness, through patriarchy, through cis heteropatriarchy, through colonialism. And so if we don't adopt a disability justice analysis we won't get to abolition. We'll just get to new and different forms of policing of our bodies and our communities and of our safety and our ways that we try and keep each other safe. So when people ask, as Leah was saying, what next? What instead? What are we doing instead of police? We also can really look to the ways in which we are already creating communities of care in the ways that people have describing, particularly in disabled communities, but also communities that have experienced police violence and violence of the state in every setting, and learn how to live interdependently in ways that make abolition possible. And someone who writes about that brilliantly in their book called Care Work is Leah. So those are my initial answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Yeah, I wrote a couple books. This is Leah again. I want to say, when I first saw this panel, I was like, it's an hour. This is great. That's actually accessible for a lot of people, because I don't know about you, there's only so many 2 to 3 hour Zooms I can sit through without just my brain going someplace else and my butt going another. But I'm just like, we could talk about this stuff all day. There's so much to share, because when I hear you, Andrea, speak about interdependence, we've all talked about it. My brain goes to, we could sit in this village the next 10 years talking about what interdependence really means in practice. You know, what it really means for folks who are in emotional crisis to have what we need, right? You know, what it really means to unpack the stuff that's in so many people's heads about, oh, well, depression's okay, but that's a scary mental health disability, right? You know, it's very easy, I think, for a lot of people to be like, well, I'm not ableist, but then to be like, oh, but I still hear the word psychosis, and I'm like, ooh, I don't know. So I asked 3 big questions to start under the guise of one question. I'm going to segue to my second bunch of questions. And we have around 15 minutes left for this conversation. I know it went really quickly. So I just want to turn the floor back over to the 3 of you and ask if you would pick some current issues or campaigns where disability justice and abolition come together, and or some organizing projects, tools, resources you can point people towards who are like, I want to know how to get involved in this. I'm already involved in it, but I want to deepen my work. Where do I go? How do I click in? And I trust that everything that you share is going to be amazing. Elliot, do you want to go? Because you were the first person to go before, and we'll go in the same order.
Okay. I'll say, this is Elliot. Yolo and Andrea, you're both brilliant. Also you, Leah, just saying. Super grateful again to be in this space. Oh my gosh, so many projects. The projects I would like to lift up and encourage folks to check out and volunteer with and give your money and time and resources to would be the Disability Justice Culture Club in East Oakland, which was founded by Stacy Park Milburn last year in response to fire season and power shutoffs by PG&E that obviously deeply impacted so many of our communities who rely on that power to survive. And lift up and honor Stacy's memory always. Shout out to Fireweed Collective, who graciously has hosted this Zoom, and I actually credit I'm like, if I hadn't found Fireweed, which back when I found it was called the Icarus Project, I probably would not be alive today. I think I can safely say that entry point into the movement is what made it possible for me to exit out of the system. Right before I was about to have my whole life signed away to the adults who have been responsible for me. Sins Invalid was already named, but it just please watch everything they've ever done. Please get their toolkits. Their curriculum is phenomenal. Please give them your money. And then the last two things I'll say, make a safety plan. Please, please, if you are disabled, if you are mad, I want to say that we are worth fighting for, and we do not have the luxury of making ourselves small right now. We do not have the luxury of sitting in shame. That is not our shame. That was put upon us because we need to survive, and we need to make sure our people survive. And so I know there are probably 500 reasons in your head about why you should not ask for support or talk to your friends and family. And I'm going to tell you that it is not an easy conversation, but it can be the make or break. And we are about to head into some wild, some wild ass times. Like, I don't know if you saw the debate last night. If that's any indicator of what is coming in November, make a plan. Make a plan. And your people love you and want to support you. And even if you think you don't have people, you have a whole lot. We are out here. So we are out here. Find the online groups, email Fireweed, email Beam, right? Like, find us. We are out here, and we have been doing this. The tools are there. This doesn't have to be scary. We're going to figure it out together. And the last one is Anti-Police Terror Project. Mental Health First, which got started in Sacramento this summer, which is community members, some folks who are trained in social work or psychiatry, and some folks who are survivors of the system, who are providing first response and an alternative phone number for folks to call when they're in emotional crisis. And these types of programs need a lot of support, right? If we want those alternatives, we need folks who are willing to get trained up on hotline. We need folks who are willing to get trained in verbal de-escalation. We need folks who are willing to get to know their neighbors, right? Like, so if that's something you're interested in, please check it out. And I'm gonna stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Yellow, I hope this is okay. Andrea texted me saying, I have to go at 1:55. Can I go next? So that's cool. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Andrea Ritchie.
Thank you so much, Yolo. And I'm so sorry that, this is Andrea. I'm so sorry that I have to leave this conversation that I also could be in for days. But I'm going to host a conversation among organizations that are working to defund police and invest in community safety strategies. And so that's the first place I would ask people to plug in who care about this work. If you are part of or want to join a conversation in your community about defunding police, make sure that you read the work of all the people here and raise the question of not transferring the same things that police do to social workers or mental health workers or emergency technicians or firefighters. Don't just turn the same functions over to people wearing different uniforms. Often when I talk to people who have experienced police violence in connection with mental health needs, for instance, they say to me things like, when I'm in a mental health crisis, I can't tell sometimes whether I was picked up by the police or the emergency workers. Sometimes the sheets feel a little different at the hospital, but otherwise everything feels the same. Or they talk about having been in the custody of handcuffs or Haldol for most of their lives. So don't fall for, it's not a policing response, it's a public health response that we need, without reading all the work of people like Kara Page, who I mentioned before, or other people who point out that public health has also always been about policing, surveillance, and violence against Black and brown bodies and queer and trans bodies. So be really involved in that work so that you can say, we're not just transferring the same function to other people. Another piece of work that we're doing at Interrupting Criminalization. If you're a medical provider, please reach out at interruptingcriminalization.com, because we are in a campaign with many organizations trying to come up with principles for medical providers to not participate in criminalization in any way, shape, or form, whether that's around public health orders from the pandemic, the war on drugs, policing pregnant bodies, shuffling people with unmet mental health needs into the criminal punishment system, providing terrible or non-existent medical care to people incarcerated, confining people in the ways that Elliot was describing around civil commitment, policing migrant bodies and referring them into ICE detention, participating in sterilization of people in ICE detention or prisons. There's so many ways that medical providers facilitate, participate in, condone criminalization that we want to interrupt. So it's one thing to come out and say, we're white coats for Black lives, or we support Black Lives Matter, but we want to create possibilities for people who are medical providers or staff to be in resistance to the ways that they are either mandated to participate in criminalization or sometimes do even against their own mandates because the pressure is there to do that. So we want to create opportunities to resist there. So go to interruptingcriminalization.com, email us, and we will invite you into that project if you're a medical provider or staff person. So those are the efforts. I would also invite people to support the work of HEARD, HEARD, around criminalization and police violence against deaf and hard of hearing people. I think that's it from me. And I'm gonna listen for as long as I can to what you offer, Yolo, and then I'm gonna disappear. But thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you, Andrea. Yolo. This is Leah speaking. Yolo, go for it.
This is Yolo speaking. Thank you so much, Andrea. Yes, thank you. One piece I wanna echo that I have been constantly probably yelling at people about for a while now, that both you and Elliot addressed is I've been telling people counselor cops is not the answer. I've been like hashtag no counselor cops. That's not the answer. Making people often in spaces that I am in, people are like, let's get social workers. I was like, well, let's talk about social work and the history and legacy of social work. And let's talk about the DSM and the tools they use and how these tools still are about policing and pathology, and they need to be abolished. Right. One project that I want to share a little bit about is a project I'm really excited and grateful to be in partnership with Depressed While Black and Made Borja. We have been working on the project Build a Black Vision for Mental Health. And what it is essentially a conglomerate of folks, Black folks who are living with mental conditions, mad Black folks who are invested in abolishing the system, really trying to imagine what is our most loving, radical, and caring vision for what Black healing and mental health care can look like in this world, right? When we have village care centered. And a big part of that initiative has been highlighting the really terrible and traumatic experiences that Black people continue to have within the psychiatric jails. And I think that building on what Andrea said earlier, we don't call them hospitals. We don't call them, they are jails, right? They use the same policies, strategies, resources, tools, and to dehumanize and denigrate Black people who are living in crisis, who are living with mental illness and conditions. And so we are very clear that this is a prison. These are prisons. And because these institutions disappear so many Black folks, so many of our folks, and there is very little support when one has been wronged or violated in those institutions to get those wrongs redressed. We have been really vigilant about sharing stories with folks. You might have seen, we've had a partnership with the Mighty where we had many people share their first person accounts. We've also had several different interviews with people sharing their experiences as well. In addition to that, we've also, one thing I'm proud of to support, and it's something that Amade started, but Beam has been supporting Amade with, IMADE, is a mental health hospital wish list, which essentially built was essentially what we did. Essentially what we've done is build relationships with these institutions and be able to connect with folks who are inside these institutions to ask them what are their needs or what are the care items they would like to help themselves be in as much dignity and respect as they can in those spaces, right? And so through that partnership, we have bought flip-flops, t-shirts, bonnets, do-rags, lotion, toothbrushes, all these items that, as I say it, I get increasingly enraged that like this is something that's supposed to be like, this is something that's supposed to be like something that we have to do. Like this is like this is extra, excuse me, like, the idea. But it is to affirm the dignity of our folks and let our folks know that they will not be forgotten. We are continuing to fight on the outside to abolish these systems, to reimagine what care can look like. And I think these gestures, so many folks let us know, and I know that there can be so much fuel to help you kind of get through these terrible experiences and denigrating experiences in those spaces. So check out Imade, I-M-A-D-E, Depressed While Black, and her work, and also Build a Black Vision for Mental Health as well on Beam's website, which is beam.community, COMMUNITY.
This is Leah. Thank you so much, Yolo. Thank you so much, Elliot. Thank you so much to the interpretation team, everybody who put in work to make this event happen. This is just the beginning. To all of you 300 and something people who chose to take this hour to attend, we are about to wrap up. This is the first of many events. You can go to abolitionanddisabilityjustice.com to see statements, Instagram, Twitter, social media, whatever, upcoming events that we're doing. There were a lot of different organizations that co-sponsored this event. The latest notes I got, and I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants to do some facilitation that wasn't originally on my docket to do, but the knowledge I have is that someone was like, oh, we're not sure if all of them wanted to be shouted out, so I'm not gonna list them, but just know that was like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 organizations that worked together to make this happen. Thank you to all of you. I'm just really grateful for the breadth of knowledge that Yolo, Elliot, Andrea were able to cover in this past hour. There are so many ways that we can plug into doing disability justice and abolitionist work. And one thing that I wanted to leave on, besides just a huge gratitude and thank you, is that if anyone listening or watching this is like, still like, how do I plug in? There are a million different little ways you can. And one of the first places is to start unpacking the ways we've been taught to be afraid of disability and mental conditions, madness, psychiatric disability within ourselves and our communities. And to start with the really first step of just asking people what they need. Yolo, I mean, the project you talked about bringing people bonnets and lotion and do-rags, and that gets me, it's so beautiful, and it gets me angry too. It gets me, I'm continually angry for all of our folks and the brutalities that we're put under. And I'm also continually inspired by the work we do to make change in real little big ways every day. So we are at time. Thank you so much for coming together, and we look forward to meeting each other in the streets, in the bed, in lockup, on Zoom, in the whirlwind, as we continue to make the world that we deserve possible. Thank you so much.